Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. I am your co-host, Jamie Bateman, joined today by my fellow co-host, Chris Seveny. Chris, do I have enough energy for you today? Is this good enough?
Well, this is the second time around, Jamie, so we're recording today. So a little more pep in the step. So it's getting better. It's getting better.
The caffeine started to kick in a little bit more, so Chris gives me a hard time for not having enough energy sometimes. And, so I'll try to really, bring the energy today. But today, for our listeners, we are joined by Marco Bario. Marco, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good today, guys. How you doing?
Good. Hopefully I said your last name correctly.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, good.
Jamie scheduled this at the time to get Marco to roll out of bed as he's on the West Coast, but bright and early on the West Coast.
Yeah, Marco, you already said before we hit record that you're not normally working this early. Is that right? Is that fair?
I don't. I'm really not worth a damn these days before about 9 a.m. my time. So it's better not to unleash me on the world. So this will be fun, guys.
Yeah, we'll have to get into it. So for the listeners out there who don't know who you are, you mind sharing a little bit of your background and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, I'll give you the short version of the. Well, I'll start with what I'm up to these days. It's real simple. I market to mom and pops who own notes. So these are people who owned a property at some point and sold it and carried back paper. And as I say, they no longer own property, but they own paper. And that's nothing but a different type of asset that can be bought and sold. Mm-hmm. I'd started buying institutional notes. And I still, will dabble with those a little bit. But really what I prefer, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, today, is dealing with individual note holders. How I got here is a longer story. I started investing in real estate about 5 years ago by going to it started when I went to a local real estate meetup. I'm in Southern California. We've got a lot of great real estate investors here and a lot of great groups. And this one in particular was called For Investors, by Investors. There's several chapters around Southern California. Yeah, I know it's similar to a loan servicing company, right?
Five by.
Yeah,
Jamie and I look at each other like, so we actually have a story about that for another day and time.
Yeah.
Well, I know the founders of that group well, and the guys. I mean, Ellis nice. San Jose, you guys probably know. He's one of the founders of that group. He's active in Facebook groups, and a guy named Jeremy Roll, who I've learned a lot from. But I started by going to those meetings, and for those who go to real estate meetings, every week is a new topic, and every week is a new shiny light. Shiny object that I want to go invest in. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to wholesale. No, I'm going to invest in syndications. No, I'm going to start my own commercial syndications. No,
Chris should not go to those groups then.
Oh, geez, it's
squirrel.
Yes.
I'm researching printing 3D concrete homes right now. So that's my
stop.
Cobod, COBOD. Look them up. They have 3D printers up to 3 stories tall.
The problem is Chris will prove us wrong and he'll be successful in all of it. So then it's like, okay, that was a good idea.
You're dangerous because you've got the building and engineering and financial background. So yes, unfortunately, your toolbox is too large. If you actually can't convince yourself you can do it, right? But that's how that started for me. So 5 years ago, and I started investing in syndications because I had money. In hindsight, I wish I'd waited, but I had money in the stock market that had done very well, not because I'm smart, but because the stock market had done very well. And I thought, well, gee, I'd ridden it down 50% or so after the last stock market fall off. And I'm to the point I don't want to have to work for the rest of my life, and I don't want to have to ride out another market correction, which could be longer. So I thought, well, what else can I do with this? It so happens that Dave Coe, who's one of the guys who runs one of the Phoebe chapters, knew a lot about self-directed retirement investing. So I went and had met him for drinks, and he taught me about that, which led to me rolling those funds over into ultimately my solo 401k and starting to invest in syndication. So that's how I started.
Yeah, I'm curious real quickly at that point, what was your were you working full time, or what was your personal situation 5 years ago?
Yeah, a lot of things were happening at once. I'm working backwards, and we'll get to the work part.
Mm-hmm.
I had a career that, in hindsight, was really kind of winding up for me in the film and television industry. I spent a long time, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But so I was also looking for what do I really want to be when I grow up, and that really is the overarching piece of all this for me, is what do I want to be when I grow up. And so first was to take care of these retirement assets, because I thought, I want to make sure they're there, and I don't want to write out a correction. But then it was, well, how can I not go back to what I'd been doing for my career? Not that I didn't love it. And what I'd been doing is this: I started out in the television industry, working on television, TV shows, network primetime sitcoms, mostly 4-camera sitcoms, and with the laugh track. And I worked on a lot of those over the years, a lot of different studios and networks and so forth. And ultimately became what they call a line producer. I oversaw the budgets and the schedules and the crews and things like that, and ultimately delivering each episode every week. But and then I transitioned into what's called post-production, which is what happens after all the footage leaves the set. It's post-production. So back in those days, it was a combination of film and videotape. And I ended up working at Technicolor, which was the original. Is no more in the film post-production business, but we were a big player at the time, and eventually transitioned into feature film post-production and oversaw theatrical post-production for Technicolor on the West Coast. But being on the West Coast, we were involved with projects from starting in London and Canada and New York and everywhere. So I worked on a lot of major studio feature films and oversaw our post-production services. And we were transitioning to digital at the time, so a lot of technology and color science and color management and new services, and really, really, really cool stuff. Really stuff I was fortunate to be a part of. But it's not something that I want to do anymore. Part of the reason for that is technology took over and invest where we'd invest $1 million in a suite to do a certain task. It's compute, Moore's law takes over. Not just that, but also globalization. But the work that we did in Los Angeles is now done all over the world. There's a lot more competition because the cost of entry is less. So, frankly, a guy approaching middle age, making a good salary as an executive at a big company, my days were numbered there. So,
got it.
So all that was happening at once. That's a long answer to your question, Jamie. It was first, take care of retirement. Good. Second, well, how do I buy groceries and stay busy? So
it's good context. I mean, we all have different stories as to how we got here into the note space. So that's pretty interesting. I didn't know a lot of that about you. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to ask, as you got into the note space, and it's interesting because I enjoy hearing the different aspects of how people do things. We had a gentleman on recently who did very similar to you, but strictly with land, where he was, essentially, finding, reaching out, mass mailings, finding land to turn around, owner finance it, and kind of go through that perspective. What got you down the path? Because again, there's many different aspects of note investing. There's buying existing paper from hedge funds. There's doing what you're doing, is finding the mom and pops who may have seller finance a note here and there. Kind of what made you go down that path of note investing? And did you try you mentioned you kind of did some institutional prior, but curious what were the overarching reason why you jumped into this side?
I think my professional journey has been a path of working with studio executives and demanding producers and creative executive, creative people like directors and editors and so forth, to these nice, simple mom and pop note holders who are so wonderful to deal with. I really love that part of my job, and that's been the magnet that's drawn me deeper and deeper into this world. I mean, that's the honest answer. I believe there are other ways to make more money in real estate. I do okay. I've got to hustle to get each deal, but what I love is talking to the note holders. I get to help them. Real estate, people who buy houses, I think more identify with this, and at the level I buy notes, real estate is really about solving people's problems.
Mm-hmm.
Those who knock on doors or send postcards to buy houses will tell you it's not
Mm-hmm.
always cash that solves the problem. It's finding the people what they need and how they need it that solves the problem, and then it becomes a win-win deal for both.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, last month I closed on a note to help a woman and her husband buy a new home in the same mobile home park community they were living in, but it was a big deal for them because their home was kind of falling apart and they needed to move.
Mm-hmm.
I help people relocate to be closer to children and grandchildren. I help people who dad died and left the note to the 3 siblings, and the last thing they want, A, is to split up the note payment 3 ways, but B, really to be reminded of their old man, each month when the payment comes in, they just want to move on. Or a spouse whose husband died, same thing. And that was the house we used to live in, and I really just kind of want to move on from those memories. People open up to me, surprisingly, with their stories. And that way I've continued, I guess, in the story business, but in a much different, touchy-feely way. And that's my favorite part of it.
That's really interesting. Have you read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss?
Yeah.
Just when you were speaking, I thought about that. And he talks about in negotiation, typically the price is actually not the main factor. It's usually, obviously it's an important factor, right? But it's usually something else that's really the driving factor for the other party. So it sounds like you're focused on that and you're able to solve people's problems. That's really, really cool. We talk about, every deal has the number side. We just talked about this with Dan. Every deal has the numbers, but then it also has a story. And it seems like, you're pretty focused on that human element and the story, which I think is really cool.
We got plenty of content for the good deeds that Marco's already done.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking that too. He's like, check. He's done a bunch of good deeds that we've already talked about.
I have a few questions based off of kind of what you meant, kind of stuff you do. And so you do a lot of mailings and stuff like that. I'm curious, how many leads do you get per month based off of spending X amount of marketing? And again, I know it's all over the place, but the question is more like, I think some people think they can spend $200 in mailings and think that they're going to get 10 leads. And I know that's not the case. I think somebody I spoke to once said they spend $3 to $5 grand per month and they get maybe a handful of leads and maybe close on 1 or 2 deals or something, maybe. But I'm just curious. And again, don't need hard numbers, but kind of just, explain to the business so people understand, because again, you can go on Facebook and someone says, oh yeah, if you spend $250 a month on mailings, you'll get all these leads coming in your door. And I know it takes 5 mailings to actually get someone to even respond to you, but just curious we like to talk about the reality. So I'm curious, what is somewhat the reality?
I wish I had bet somebody, because I said, said to myself, because I work alone and I talk to myself, Chris is going to ask about the KPIs.
Yeah.
Yes. Chris is going to ask about the KPIs, right?
He likes to measure things.
Yes. Hey now.
Jeez.
I told you I'm a little raw today. I hate sending letters, Chris. I hated it. And I haven't sent one in over a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I imagine most people are going to be surprised to hear this, but I market online.
Okay.
I'll probably get back into sending letters.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's motivated that is recently I closed a couple of same seller, but a couple
Mm-hmm.
notes that he held. Again, his old man had passed away, and
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to. These are pretty banged up. By the way, the old man who holds the note, they're not too good at all the stuff that we want, servicers and pay histories, and
that's question 2 and 3 actually.
that's a whole other topic. Yeah, that's all. These things are like, oh my god, what? But and that's part of the interesting thing too. However, So yeah, I mean, that's a case where I'd send a postcard to somebody, and I guess his dad threw it in a file with a note. This is really what you want to happen, because then the son found it when he was going through the records, and he gave me a call, and we ended up doing business together, and that's great. So you'll hear this from every person who teaches sending mail. You have to be consistent with it. You can't expect deals to close. If you get a 1% return rate, that's great. And you'll probably close 1 in 10 of those phone calls you receive.
Yeah.
Those are the realistic numbers.
Okay.
I hate rejection, and I hate the 1 in 10 part. So what I started doing is marketing online. And I'll be honest with you, you're all welcome to do it. You're all welcome to pay Google a lot of your money, and I have. I've spent more than many very expensive Note Mastermind seminars on Google Ads as I figured it out. And I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars, but I was determined to be further down in the funnel. And for those who understand marketing, right, it's a funnel. If you send a postcard to somebody, you generally get phone calls from people who are tire kickers. I wonder what my note is worth. They may or may not have any intention of closing a deal with you. However, if they're on Google and they say, sell my mortgage note, they're at a point they're ready to do business. So I tend to close, for me, about 1 in 3 of those deals.
Good.
But I've had to pay, and I've had to invest, and it's been a long path to get there. There are only a handful of us out there. I know who I compete against for those clicks.
Yep.
We all have our own methods. You know, if another dozen of you want to get in the space, have at it, but you're going to mess it up for all of us. And it's hard for you. You know, I don't discourage anybody. I mean, I'm not going to go too deep into my methods, but it's something I've done myself. I recently had a call with a professional company who does this. And the problem is, the hard part about what we do is it's so niche. I mean, you can imagine somebody types the term mortgage into Google, immediately you're competing with Quicken Loans, you know, Rocket Mortgage, that click, because Google assumes, oh, this person obviously needs a mortgage. They're buying a house. And you can imagine what those companies are paying for their online marketing campaigns. So you have to, or you can go down the road of contract for deed, you know, land contract. There's a lot of that in the seller finance space. But just the term contract is so generic, and you get mixed in with everything from house wholesalers to, you know, you name it.
So one question I was going to ask, and you mentioned, kind of hinted upon, like the paperwork's usually probably very hairy and stuff. When they go to sell it, do they expect to sell it at a discount? Like, do they understand they're not going to get, like, if the balance on the loan is 25,000, which they probably don't even know what the balance is because they don't run amortization tables and just collect the payments. But do they understand, like, if it was 25,000, they're probably not getting 25,000? Or is it when they think they're going to sell this, they think that it's worth, you know, that plus some?
Yeah, I can tell in the first minute or so of the conversation if I'm going to get a deal, and that's one of the things that I look for. If they call assuming that some people, you know what, it's a lot of it's gender. It's funny, but guys are numbers people, and they'll call and they'll say, well, hey, I've got, you know, 100 and however many payments left on this note, and each payment is worth X, and you're going to get all this money, and you should pay me more than the balance.
Right. Well, then why don't you just keep it?
My chances of closing that deal are less than zero, I promise.
Yeah.
Or someone will, you know, or someone will come in right now with the logic of, well, this note's paying 4%. You know, I mean, you know, you can, you know, mortgages are, you know, still below 4%. Are they now? I don't know. They're starting to go up, but, and they'll come in with that logic. Well, that's a really good return. Like, well, sir, you know, it's in the secondary note market, it's not, and here are the reasons why. And logic is, you know, back to never split the difference. Logic just doesn't close deals. An emotional connection closes deals.
Yeah, he does talk about
they want to sell the note, and I never go for the jugular. It's not how I do business. But some people are just ready to sell the note, and it's not about price. When it comes to the numbers, it doesn't really happen.
Interesting. I don't
think I totally answered Chris's question, but
no, you did. No, you actually did.
Okay.
So I got it. You know, occasionally people will reach out. I'm sure you have people ask you questions, kind of newer note investors who ask questions. I'm got a question last night and this morning through Facebook from somebody. And since you're in you buy these types of notes, I'm curious what you would say. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's pretty long, but essentially he's looking at buying a note that's in Texas that's 2 to 3 years old. And they've been paying, but the pay history is pretty much non-existent. And there's photos of checks for the last 12 months, so as a note investor, note buyer, and again, this isn't from a mom and pop directly, but I think it's similar to the type of paper that you buy. What would you do as a note buyer to clean that up? I mean, is that something you would still buy where there's not really a clear pay history? And if so, what can you do to mitigate that risk? Going forward, do an estoppel agreement or some kind of affidavit or anything?
Yes, I do an estoppel. You said there's photos of the checks?
Photos of the last 12 months, but I guess the first 1 to 2 years, there's really nothing.
Okay.
And so how
Jamie,
does that?
I'm doing backflips. Photos of checks, I'm doing backflips.
Okay. So that's not an issue from a foreclosure standpoint, and not that your goal is to foreclose. I understand that, but how does that affect the value of the note for you if you're looking at a deal like that?
Photos of checks for the last 12 months are great. And first of all, more of these than you probably would realize are professionally serviced, not by servicing companies. Often title companies and escrow companies have what they call long-term escrow divisions or services they provide, and they're collecting payments and issuing statements. So probably more than half of what I see is that. So we're talking about the others. And I look for photocopies of checks. I do. I know the jury's out on whether I should or not, but I do a payor interview. I do talk to, if I'm buying, if people I sell to perform these as well in the seller finance space, really high level. Hey, and it's mostly informational. It's mostly, hey, we're going to buy this. I just want you to understand. The only thing that'll change is where you're going to send your payments. By the way, this is what we show the balance. Does that sound correct? Would you be okay if we send a document to you? It's called an estoppel. And would you sign it?
So you do that before you buy, as far as the estoppel goes?
The estoppel, the estoppel is required in order to close. Because once you've closed, you can't get anybody to do anything.
Sure. Understood. Yeah.
So the estoppel's done before.
And a lot of these sellers probably have some connection or some relationship with the borrower, where again, you're having that conversation and you're not asking them, hey, you need to make your payments and stuff. You're just basically introducing yourself. It's almost like a conversation of a future hello letter of, hey, look, here's what's going to happen. Here's kind of some of the things. And it's more of and then you can probably get a good sense from them as well, what you might be able to anticipate or expect from them.
Yeah, I'll say, by the way, are you enjoying the house? Are you living? Are you living there? I heard you were living there, and oh no, I'm renting it out to my sister. Oh, interesting. Okay. Just real casual conversation. Does the house need any repair? I mean, if the door seems open, you might ask, have you had to invest in the house? Does it need any repairs? So that you might find out the roof is leaking. You never know what might come up. Open-ended questions lead to a lot of information, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's good. So now when you're buying these, I mean, I'm sure you have different exit strategies, but are you looking to buy and hold these, or do you kind of flip them? You mentioned notes that you sell. How do you determine what you're going to do with that note?
I'm like a freaking note hoarder, man. I can't sell it. Can't do it. I've sold some partials. I've sold a couple whole notes. But mostly they just sit.
Gotcha.
Sit.
Yeah. No, I mean,
nice.
That's great.
And what's the how many typically on average will go non-performing? Another KPI question. Sorry. It's like, it's not even 9 o'clock yet here, and he's asking me damn questions.
So I'll tell you a story.
Go ahead. Stories work too.
Okay, so I didn't.
Stories are better, actually.
I didn't speak to a guy before I bought a note, and but I spoke to him right after, and he was angry that the guy had sold the note to me, and I said, I said, well, he told me that he'd spoken to you a couple times during the process. I'm sorry, and sorry to caught you off guard, but this comes up a lot, actually. Sometimes payors are just mad that the note's being sold for no particular reason. So so he was really mad. He was really mad and used several 4-letter words. Especially, I said, well, I'm in, just in California, but the company I use to collect the payments is in such and such. And the guy was in Oklahoma. He said, California.
Oh boy.
He was so mad. I was in California. Then he said, F you, and then he hung up the phone on me. And that was the end of that conversation. Well, he never sent a payment in after that. It had been a performing note. It's like, well,
oh my gosh,
isn't that special? But the story has a happy ending because we went down the foreclosure route with him. So we got it, whatever, notice of default and so forth. And it was quiet for, I would say, 4 or 5 months. And then his attorney sent a payment in. Our attorney received a payment, a full payoff from him, and that was it. He just didn't want to deal with me. So, Chris, it's a really small percentage. I don't, I don't tend to buy the stuff that's that hairy.
Has most of the stuff been originated for several years? It's not mostly new stuff, is it? It's stuff that's probably been around for 5 years, or do you look at that at all when you're making your analysis? How long?
Yeah, the pay history for me is number one. I'm looking at credit and the professional, the higher end institutional borrower. Everybody's looking at credit in this world. Yeah. And it's a certain determination. 630 above is considered where you want to be. If I see a pay history that's 5 years and I see it's a family in the house and they're doing everything they need to do to keep a roof over the head for the family, it's that, everybody deals with some sort of the emotional equity aspect of note investing. To me, that's a sound investment. And they may run late every now and then, but they're going to find a way to keep the roof over the head for themselves and the family. So,
yeah, one of the things that and again, I don't dip into this space, but I've had some people send me some notes that are kind of that they, do what you do, but it doesn't fit their criteria. And like, hey, Chris, you want to look at this? And what I've seen recently with a lot of stuff that's recently been originated is, the properties have been in a little more distress, and they've been, may have been on the market for like, call it $50,000, but the note now is $80,000. And the property sat for 8 months on the market at like 50,000, and they finally got somebody at 80. I'll look at it and I'm like, ooh, that's probably only worth a $30,000 property. And, and I see more, I see a lot of that on the institutional side more than on the individual mom and pop side. But I was curious if you ever see any of that on the mom and pop side as well.
Yeah, I'm buying one right now. It's a non-performer. Let's say it this way: the restaurant I had dinner at last night probably had more people dining there than the population of this town, where the note is located. Right? It's and I don't usually do these. I'll be honest; it's a unique situation. One thing that's really powerful for me is referrals from attorneys and accountants and people like that. And when an attorney reaches out to me, I kind of bend over backwards to make the relationship go. So for a very small investment, I'm going to take on this note. It's non-performing. Yes, the balance of the note is probably double what the property's worth. And I was just honest about that. I said, here's what, not that there are many comps, but, looking at Zillow is, just the high end company involved with the BPO in this particular one. Here's the most I think I could get for this property, and we're certainly going to have to go to taking back the property. So here's what I can pay, and it's not much money. Are you willing to do it? Yes, because this attorney's client had inherited this from a father. This comes up a lot, right? And just want not worth he doesn't want the headache or in the memory or anything. Just that sounds great for us. Thanks. Can you close in 30 days? Okay.
Interesting. I'm curious, do you because I've bought a few of these types of loans, and I've run into some usury law issues. One in particular that stands out. the note rate when I bought it was 14.385% coupon rate on the note itself. And we bought it and lowered it to 10% after, legal advice. And which, I still got it at a really good price. Curious if you run into that situation sometimes in the seller finance space.
Honestly, the rates are just too low. I mean, people often have a relationship with the person they're selling to. So for that reason, they'll do it at 0% or
Yeah.
2 or 3%, or they think that, well, the banks, when I wrote this loan, were charging 4 or 5%. So that's what I charge them.
Right. That makes sense.
I advise people when they call me in advance, and some do, the reasons they wouldn't do that. I said, well, A, the bank doesn't lend their own money, they lend other people's money.
Right.
B, the banks tend to get bailed out when there's a problem of a mass proportion. You won't. Oh, that makes
Two
sense.
good points.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Interesting.
Now, is most of the stuff you buy kind of single families, or have you bought other things? I joked to Jamie the other day, I was looking at one that was a horse track that was sent my way. So Jamie, I haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, but still negotiating. But, curious if, you see pretty much everything, or is most of the stuff you see kind of manufactured or single families or stuff like
I
that?
think I asked Chris if there was a mafia connection to that one, but anyway, we'll move on. It was a joke.
I think if Hoff is, it's worth more if Hoff is buried below the racetrack.
It's the dog tracks in the Northeast that have the mafia connections. The horse tracks in Texas, well, they may have some other connection, but probably not the mafia. So.
Got it. Okay.
Those are where the oil profits go. So because they're losing money at the racetrack.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the question. Yeah, I do. I get some stuff leaks through. Less and less as I've refined my online marketing. But first of all, I get business notes sent in sometimes, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm. I've had notes secured by bail bond companies, podiatrists, a large commercial building, not a large commercial building, but a commercial building that housed a magazine business, which you can imagine printed magazines were suffering to begin with. But this particular guy specialized in bridal magazines, and this was during the pandemic. So there weren't a lot of weddings, therefore there weren't a lot of ad sales in that business. He was hurting. A really valuable property near the NFL stadium in Minneapolis. Those are interesting. I see less and less of them, again, because I've kind of refined my marketing. There are some buyers for business notes. There's one in particular who's been Security Financial. You've seen probably Byron, I think, just did the Tracy and Fred's event. Yep. And I deal with his son usually there, Mark. But great people, really knowledgeable. I wouldn't buy one of those personally. I just don't know how to underwrite them. But Mark, if you ever do get one, if anybody listening ever gets one, take it to these guys, because Mark will put you on the call when he talks to the seller. And the education I've gotten, I've done 3 or 4 of those with him. We've never closed a deal, unfortunately. But the education I've gotten on those calls, or just his initial list of questions he comes back with, is incredible. Incredible. Those guys, they're knowledgeable, so deep. But I have one to mention. Right now I have someone submitted to me a couple of weeks ago a land lease. He owns a large parcel of land in Colorado, and he's negotiating with the local power company who wants to lease a section of his land to build a wind farm. So there'd be a long-term lease, payments secured by, the payor is a large utility company. They're probably not going to default.
Yeah.
I don't know who the buyer would be for that. They're big dollars. I don't know what to do with that yet. But those are interesting. They come every now and then.
I was going to ask, who do you look up to in this space? You've mentioned a couple names already, but you're in such a niche within this note investing world. I mean, how many, it doesn't seem like there'd be that many experts that you could really look up to and learn from and trust. I'm just curious which people or organizations you kind of consume information from.
That's a really good question. I'm a member of Tracy and Fred's mastermind group, and much like Chris, I know you have one now as well. When I run into something that stumps me, I reach out to them often it's, I'll reach out to them, and just depending, Tracy is more the deals person, and Fred is more the marketing person, and they'll help talk me through, what my next move might be. So that's a really valuable resource.
Yeah.
And we've got them coming on soon too, don't we, Jamie?
Yeah.
And we'll check
next month, I think.
So question I had, and I know I want to ask you. You had posted the other day, I'm curious if you've gotten anywhere with this, where it was a note that was on a single family wood stick property that had a UCC lien.
Oh yeah, that was interesting.
So I'm curious if you found out any more about that. That just seems really odd because, and again, I know of UCC liens, and I mentioned in post, those are more on like personal property type things of businesses with cars, or, if you did a JV deal, someone may put a UCC lien, but, on property, I would think, there's a mortgage, or deed of trust. I was curious if you found out any more information on that.
I'm a little stumped as to why they did it. But that aside, I submitted it to, it's a note on a property in Washington State, and I've submitted it to a servicer who happens to be based in Washington State, and they've weighed in with their opinion, but we've also sent it to an attorney for review. Because the question is, and I haven't heard back on that yet, the question is whether that lien is enforceable because it was never filed with the land records in Washington, in King County, where the property is located in Washington State. This particular attorney initially has responded and said, well, they just dealt with something very similar in California, which has similar laws. And because the UCC lien wasn't filed with the land records, it really wasn't enforceable, unfortunately. So what's really, and she's going to check the Washington laws to see as well. What's interesting in this property, there was property sold in 2004. There was a Bank of America mortgage deed of trust filed at that time, purchase money, and that still remains. There's been no release of that. There is again, the stuff I see, there is a deed of trust that was filed several years later, and the granted to a bail bond company. So there's that. And we're talking, this is a nicer house in a nice area in King County, which is an expensive real estate county these days. So then this other UCC thing came up, and why, and it's payable to an attorney. We're not sure why the attorney, I think one of my last comments on that Facebook thread was, well, you would think this would be on the bar exam, although they're not a real estate attorney, but you would think they would know to file a deed of trust rather than a UCC lien. But
that's why I figured there must be some reason they went that route, but
we don't
interesting.
know. No, we don't know.
What other questions you got, Jamie?
I was curious, just kind of popped into my head, but what's your typical, we joked that you don't like, Friday mornings, you don't do work or whatever, but what's your typical day look like as a seller financing note investor? What's your day look like?
Every day I work on my Google ads. One of the things I will tell you, one of the keys to success in Google ads is negative keywords. So I usually look at the searches that were done the previous day, and I carve out certain terms I don't want, which is interesting feedback for me too, because I see what people are searching for. Google's restricted a lot of what you can see, but you do see a certain amount. So I get inside the heads of people, right? It's instant information. And then I usually have some emails that come in. Being on the West Coast, I do get emails from, like a Fanac who's on East Coast time, or other buyers or other people that I'll deal with. What else do I do? Follow up on deals. You've got to nudge people along the way to get them to commit, hopefully. I've launched a newsletter, so now I have my newsletter.
Yeah, you just launched that a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
I love it, by the way.
Yeah.
It's
not too long. It's
nice, clean, crisp, and short. Short and sweet. And I saw that and I'm like, man, not gonna copy it, but I'm like, short and sweet is also because I get something newsletters. And again, Jamie will know, like, I'm the squirrel with the, shiny object. And if something's more than like a few scrolls, on the phone or, too much reading, you lose people. So,
Well,
excellent.
you're welcome to copy it because I essentially did. I subscribe to James Clear's newsletter.
Okay,
he's great.
Who's great. I read his book
Yeah.
twice last year,
Yeah.
and try the best I can to implement that for improving habits.
Mm.
And he has a great newsletter. That's his are very short and sweet. And
Yeah,
What's his
I like
name?
those. James Clear. It's
Clear.
Atomic Habits.
Oh, okay, yeah,
James
yeah.
Clear.
It's in my book. It's in my.
Yeah,
list
it's
to
really
read.
good, and I mean,
Mhm.
he doesn't put down goals necessarily because you
Mhm.
got to know where you're going.
Yeah.
But it's all about habits. They're much more powerful than having these lofty goals without being able to execute them. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Yeah, I follow him as well. He's great.
So yeah, so the idea of short, little tidbits was
Yeah.
viral. Thank you, James Clear. I'm sure his attorneys will be calling me now. Thanks, guys.
No, he'll do like a three section. I forget what they are, but
It's like 3, 2, 1. Three
Yeah.
three of his thoughts, 2 from others, and 1. I can't remember
Yeah.
what the one is, but
exactly. But they're small bite size, but tons of really good knowledge in there. So, yeah, I mean, but I guess, how many hours would you say are you working 12, 15 hours a day? Or, I mean, I just think it's pretty neat. It seems like you've got a nice, not saying it's easy. That's not what I'm suggesting, but it's a fairly flexible setup. It seems like, is that fair to say?
well, one of the things that was important to me when I was transitioning careers is I wanted something I could do from anywhere.
Mhm.
And I can do what I do from anywhere. I
Mm-hmm.
was in Cabo a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't work much there, but I had my computer and I could check in and I could follow up on some deals.
Mm-hmm.
The most time consuming piece is underwriting deals. Just like for all of us in the notes space, it's similar. I want to know about as much as I can find online about the property and title records and taxes and all that kind of stuff. And I like to do as much as I can. If I'm not, I buy some of my deals and I submit some of my deals. I generate fees as a wholesaler, broker, whatever. And I like to know as much as I can before I submit. I may or may not pull credit, but I do pretty much everything else before I submit it. So it takes a fair amount of time. And I'm guilty. Sometimes I'll go down the wormhole. I'm like, oh, that's a neat town. Oh, wow, look at the parks they have there.
Yeah.
Hey, how much a house is going for? Hey, I could live there someday. I gotta get back to work.
Easy to do. Yep. Interesting.
Okay.
What would you say, looking back in the 5 years you've been in the space, what's one of the big mistakes you've made, if there is one? Or something you might change if with hindsight, that you do a little bit differently.
I don't know, Jamie. I went through my midlife thing. I'm 52 now. I went through my midlife thing around the time all this was happening, and to me, entrepreneurship is personal growth. They're the same thing, and I'm a big believer in just being on the path that I'm on. And there's lessons presented along the way. This is going to turn into a different kind of podcast here in a second if I keep going. I've gotten into a lot of deals knowing that I didn't know how I was going to get out because I wanted to learn from them. When I was started investing in notes, I bought, people say, are you a first person, a second person? I used to kind of say I was a second person, but I was buying everything because I wanted to figure out how to get out of them. I equate it to Houdini would say, you're going to lock me in this box. You're going to put the chains and the thing and then drop me into a tank of water and I'm going to figure out how to get out. He had a pretty good idea how he was going to get out, I'm sure. But, we're maybe not. Right. And that's, I think, what note investing is and what drew me to it. So there are deals that, were uglier than I thought they would be, but I've gotten out alive every single time.
Yeah, seems like you have a really good perspective on, looking at maybe a blessing in disguise as opposed to just treating it like a problem.
There's
in and of itself.
a mentor who I take classes from and learn from, and he just calls those seminars. You know, when we lose money on a deal, that was another seminar for you. Yep.
We had Rod Cleef on. He uses that term. Seminar, but
it was a seminar.
So as we wrap up, Marco, this episode, we always ask people, if they have, and again, you've already given us plenty of good deeds you've done. We also ask people kind of if they have a note and bolt, a little, tidbit of information or something that you learned and kind of carry through with you through the years that, isn't part of any, high level training course or anything like that. And if you need a minute, because we always put people on the spot, Jamie has one in his mind that he can already add. So
do you have one, Chris?
I can come up with one pretty quick just by buying time sitting here talking really fast. But
I mean, I'll leave you on the entrepreneur thing. I'll leave you with something. My significant other is she coaches small business owners. She's an executive coach and former CEO and works a lot of small business owners. She's got a great phrase that motion creates, what's it? I'm going to mess it up. Commotion creates motion. I think commotion creates motion. Anyway, I find on the days where I'm stuck to go down the path of launching a newsletter or making some calls to some people who might be on the fence about selling. Sometimes those don't directly lead to deals, but it's something about putting the energy out there. Again, I'm the California guy going down this hippy dippy road, but it's something about putting that effort and energy out into the world. Something comes back every single time. So this motion,
motion
creates motion. Yeah.
Well, I think
that to me is a key part of being an entrepreneur.
James Clear kind of talks about that as well. I mean, similar, where it's like, just take actions, just get started, or laying your shoes out before bed to go running, or just get out the door, just get started, right? And that creates motion and creates progress. And it may not be an immediate return, but like you're saying, it does create positive results normally. So
yes,
that's good. Chris, did you come up with yours?
Well, I just want to kind of just touch upon some of the things that really I thought was excellent from this episode. Was one, the way Marco approaches these deals of really getting to know the seller and even the borrower, because he can do a lot of evaluation from that standpoint. So it's another part of due diligence that, every aspect of investing has its own type of due diligence. And you always want to think of ways that first are legal. First of all, before if these were all non-performing, you're probably not going to want to get on the phone with the borrower, to be honest. From that perspective, you just want to be careful, but just understand the due diligence and what's involved. And most importantly, put yourself in those people's shoes. That's the one thing I would say about note investing that I constantly come back to is, it's like playing blackjack. You got to play the odds. If there's somebody that's been in a property 30 years and, they had a tragic event happen and so forth, and, they're getting back on their feet and there's a lot of equity in the property, again, more than likely you'd want to work with them, because if you don't, then they're going to file bankruptcy. They're not going to leave this house. I had a woman email me or Facebook messaged me that she was looking at a note in Philadelphia that hasn't been performing. And the people, it's a woman, she knows a woman, it's an elderly woman, has been there for like 36 years. And she's like, I'm going to buy the note and I'm going to go, basically get them on a deed in lieu and, get the property and and all this stuff. And I said, look, deed in lieus happen probably 1% of the time. And that is probably average. The longer the person's been in the property, the less chance there is of a deed in lieu, because there is that emotional equity. If somebody's been in the property 2 years and the markets crash and the property is kind of near or underwater, there's no emotional equity in that property. But somebody who's been there and, had their kids grow up there and so forth, you're not getting a deed in lieu. I mean, I had a family member that I know who's, just had a major fire at their house, and you can't even get them to move out of the house to get it fixed for the fire. They've got so much emotional equity in this house. So, play the odds is kind of what my note and bolt is.
So my note and bolt, that was good, Chris, is that for the institutional note investor out there, start learning about seller finance. Now, don't, crowd Marco's, space or whatever, but I think it's not going away. Right. So just, I think lending is harder. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and when you say seller finance, there's different aspects of it. There's
Yeah,
originating a paper or buying seller finance, in which Marco does, but I'd say learn all
Right.
about the entire process is I think what
Right.
you're
And
getting at.
yeah. And I'm not talking CFDs that were originated by, big hedge funds or something. I'm talking about the mom and pop seller finance buying that paper like Marco's doing, because it's not going away. It's only going to grow, I think. I mean, at least in the, near to midterm, because it's harder and harder to qualify for a bank loan, and in that kind of $50,000 to $150,000 property, it's probably, I'm guessing that's kind of your sweet spot. I'm not sure, Marco. But, at least learn about it.
We just had a BPO come back at 285 today. So
okay, nice.
Nice.
But yes, Jamie, yes.
I just think it's one more thing. There's no reason you shouldn't, read Marco's newsletter, reach out to Fred and Tracy or something, start researching. And just, if you've never dabbled in this area, I'm not saying be reckless and go buy something that you don't know what you're doing, but just expose yourself to that type of note, and just understand it, because it's not going away, and you can just add one more tool to your tool belt.
No, and also just by networking with people, even if they're not doing your thing. I mean, beforehand, we were speaking just briefly before we hit live, and there's a few between websites and Facebook groups of just people in this business that might be doing different things that you get information on, and it's just continuing to grow your network is it's huge. It's part of any business. Any business needs to continue to grow and advance its network. Think of yourself as a big business. You want to continue to grow and advance and find new connections and see how other people are doing things, because it might give you a creative idea where you can implement something they're doing into your business that could either save you time, be more efficient, or save cost.
That was an extra. That was a freebie.
Yeah, so I give them away once in a while. So Marco, if first of all, again, thank you for joining us today. If people wanted to reach out to you, where can they reach out to you? Sign up for your newsletter? How can they get in touch with you?
Call me, 818-330-1100. I'm an introvert, but for some reason I can talk endlessly about real estate. and I work alone, so I'm lonely. So 818-330-1100, or my company, which is Porch Swing Funding, porchswingfunding.com. So like a swing on a front porch. Newsletter sign up is on the website. And my email is just marco@porchswingfunding.com. I help people out all the time who want to learn how to find notes or found a note and they want me to buy it. And I say, well, here, just submit it to FNAC, and here's who I deal with. And they'll see you right there. I don't get in the middle of those transactions.
I can say, not that we know each other super well, Marco, but you definitely have a good reputation in the space. So I would encourage the listeners to take you up on that offer.
Thank you.
So I chuckle because when he started giving me his phone number, every listener under the age of 35 probably just started cringing and be like, I can't talk to somebody. And he's like, oh, thank God he gave his website info.
Can I text that number? Do you
yeah. So, Jamie, you want to wrap us up?
Sure. Well, Marco, once again, thanks a ton for joining us. And to the listeners out there, please give us only positive reviews, but we do appreciate them. It does go a long way. So please give us reviews. We want you to be honest, obviously, but thanks for joining us. And don't forget to go out and do some good deeds, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.